Hey, it's Mark from Power BI at Work. Thanks for joining another video where we talk about the steps of Calculate. In this video, we're talking about step 3, which are calculate modifiers. In the first two videos, we had discussed the original foundation of filters coming implicitly, automatically from the canvas, as well as from iterators like SUMX, creating context transition. This video is our first video where we focus on something that the developer explicitly adds to Calculate. So I want to go quickly through the Calculate modifiers as you'll read about them in the definitive guide to DAX. The definitive guide to DAX will share that the three are all. So that is a calculate modifier, and you can see I split these up between filter modifiers and relationship modifiers because all removes filters over filtered columns. And remove filters is a newer term, I guess, that clarifies exactly what it's doing when used as a top-level filter argument in Calculate. So remove filters is identical to all, except that we gave it a new name to identify it when it was used standalone as a Calculate argument as a modifier. You'll notice that I have keep filters here. It's not technically considered a Calculate modifier, but is more focused on modifying the calculate arguments. So we put it here. We'll talk about that later in step 5. And then moving down to the relationship calculate modifiers, these are modifying the relationships that we drew between our dimension table and our fact table. The first one is use relationship, which allows us to activate an inactive relationship for the life of our measure, and then cross filter, which allows us to modify the direction of that filter. All right, let's move on to example 1, where we're going to use all, aka remove filters, as a modifier over this report. We'll pretend that our boss came to us and asked us to produce a measure here, or a column in our report that expresses the percentage of sales filtered over total sales. So we're just going to write here a measure called percentage sales. And we're, of course, going to start out with our calculate because we're going to add that modifier, but our expression is going to be our total sales measure. But before that expression happens, we want everything after the comma here to execute. And all we're going to add here is a remove filters over the part table. I'm going to use remove filters over the entire part table because I have two filters coming from that part table. One is vendor and one is part type. You could specify a specific column, but for this example, we're just going to use the entire table, or clear filters from the entire table. And remember, this is clearing the filters from the columns. So we're removing filters from all of the columns in the part table. I put the result in and it looks good. It's removing the filters that we see here from step 1. And in the absence of these filters from the part table, we're going to get whatever we see as our grand total overall sales. You'll see that we have a different total here, and it's because I have select vendors selected, but let's uncheck these and just validate that we have total sales. All right, let's create a percentage out of this. And to do that, I am going to use variables. So let's create a variable here, and we'll call it all sales. And then our next variable is going to be just regular sales, or a reference to our sales measure. And then our third variable is just going to be a percentage, and I'll use the divide function, and we'll divide sales over all sales. because I'm using variables, I need to use the return keyword at the end to return my result, which is %. Okay. That should turn it into a percentage or a decimal, and it does. I'm going to come back and format this as a percentage. Now, you'll remember that when our vendor was filtered, we had different totals, which was interesting. We had a respected filter here over total sales, but over here, when we were exposing all sales, we had the grand total of 686 showing. And so that's why we're seeing a reduced percentage here. Our boss may love the report when it's unfiltered, but he or she may come back to us at some point and go, what I would really love to see is the percentage of my selections, right? So if my boss wants to select 3M and BASF, they may be interested in what the percentage of that total is. And in order to do that, there's another all function called all selected. Very complex function. You can read about it on SQL BI or in the definitive guide to DAX. But what all selected does is it gives us this middle ability to clear filters in the visual while still respecting our users' report selections made outside of that visual. So again, complex function, please read up on it if you'd like more information, but it is not looking at the visual itself and making a conscious decision here to respect or to clear just what it sees. It is definitely model driven, and there is much more to the semantics of all selected. But let's replace our remove filters with all selected and see how it works. And we'll hit enter here. And this should pop to 100%, and it does. So again, highlighting that all selected, while using the all part of the function within the inside of the visual, is respecting the selected filters made outside of that visual. All right, all selected. Let's move on to use relationship. The classic example here is that we want to have a neighboring measure show up in our matrix here that reflects not only the parts that were shipped on a given date, but maybe we want to also see how much in sales were made or were ordered on that specific day. So if we go back to our model, we'll see that we have not only a ship date here, where I just called it date, but we now have an order date, and our active relationship is between date and our ship date in sales. But then we have a second relationship here created, and you'll notice this dotted line between date and order date. This is a dotted line because this is an inactive relationship, as we can only have one active relationship at a time. But with our calculate modifier working over our relationship, we can create a measure that uses that relationship. So we're going to create a measure, and we'll call it order sales. Order sales, and again, calculate total sales, and then we're going to use our calculate modifier over the relationship this time. Use relationship and give it the order date from the sales table, and the other side of that relationship is date from the timetable. And that should be it. So a little bit of formatting. And when we pull that measure in, we'll notice that now we have sales broken up between when they were ordered and when they finally shipped. So during the life of this measure, this use relationship, what it is doing is it is activating the inactive relationship, but at the same time, it's deactivating the active relationship. And that's important because if that was not happening, we would run into a conflict and we would only see sales when those two dates matched right there. All right. Last example is cross filters. This example is where we want to count customers that have made purchase, but we don't want to do it from the sales table directly because our sales table may be gigantic, millions and millions of records. We may have a lot of customers making purchases, and so the cardinality of that column may be pretty tough, especially when we consider that to do that, we would probably do a distinct count function, which is expensive on performance over the entire column in sales. So an alternative way to do that would be to use our calculate modifier, this time again over the relationship, right? We want to modify that relationship in a way where when we have a filter placed on sales or just wide open sales itself, we want it to filter our customer table. And so we're going to see where we can almost get there with this modifier. But let's go back and let's create this where we have customer count. Here I've just kind of prepped a measure where we just count the rows in customer. You can see that as we filter the product table and it propagates that filter through sales, it is not touching the customer table whatsoever because I have no filter on sales. I'm only filtering, no filter on customer. I am filtering sales though through part, but that filter is not reaching back up to my customer table. In order to change that, what I could do is add my calculate modifier cross filter, give it the two ends of the valid relationship, which are customer number from sales and customer number from table, from the customer table. And then my third argument here, I have the option of either turning off the relationship entirely or choosing for it to go in both directions. So for the life of this measure, I'm actually creating a bidirectional filter. I don't have to do it in my model, which is not great practice or best practice, but I can mimic a bidirectional relationship in my measure. So that's what I'm doing. And we hit enter, and you'll notice that nothing really changes because I have no filter over sales. So I'm still counting all of the customers that are in the customer table, but it's having no effect based on sales. So sales is not filtered yet. But the moment I do filter sales through part, you'll see that that filter is indeed going back up through sales. So my filter is here on vendor. It's filtering down. You see the direction into sales. And because I created that virtual bidirectional filter using CrossFilter, I now have a valid filter going the opposite direction, but only when sales is filtered. So you'll see that there are 3 customers that made purchase under BSF, 4 under Scotch, and 1 more customer under 3M, giving me the right total of customers making purchase. You'll notice that I have all the vendors filtered here, but if I unfilter, we return back to the total possible customers in the customer table as 6. However, this is tricky. If I select everything, I'm not really making a filter over my sales table. So I can filter them individually works great. If I select all, I'm essentially removing filters and we're returning to 6, and we know that that's not perfect. But that's how cross filters works. That is the conclusion of the calculate modifiers. Thank you for watching. If this helped you, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you next time when we talk about level 4, where we're explicitly creating our own table filters over the model, in addition to the modifiers, in addition to those automatic step 1 and step 2 model filters. All right. Thanks so much. See ya.